Hello, my name is Hunter Briggs. I'm 28 years old and smack dab in the middle of one of the most challenging, unexpected turns of my life. I currently work in the strategy department of Langford International, an industrial giant known worldwide for its luxury and intelligent furniture designs. I live in Asheville, a small town nestled in the heart of North Carolina, nestled in the majestic Appalachian Mountains. It's a fairy tale land where, come autumn, the roads snake through seas of red and gold leaves, and the fresh scent of pine fills your lungs. Asheville, with its artistically diverse cafes, markets showcasing the freshest produce from local farmers, and the French Broad River flowing lazily through the city, looks like something out of a postcard. But for me, this town is much more than a peaceful haven. It's my personal battleground, where I fight relentlessly every day to prove my worth, my identity, in the dazzling world of the rich and powerful. I was born and raised in Iowa, a peaceful state dominated by endless cornfields and a tranquil rural lifestyle. My family embodied the humble American dream. We were a typical middle-class family. My father earned his living as a mechanical engineer in a small local factory, and my mother was a teacher who enlightened young minds in elementary school. We weren't wealthy, nor were we surrounded by luxury, but we never lacked love and support. My parents taught me that true success in life comes not from chance opportunities or powerful people standing behind you, but from your own hard work, determination, and hard work. This became my philosophy of life. So from an early age, I devoted myself wholeheartedly to my studies, consistently ranking among the top students in school, and ultimately graduated with honors from the University of Iowa with a degree in business administration. After graduation, I decided to take a big step toward achieving my career goals. When I heard that Langford International was looking for young and bright talent, I applied without a moment's hesitation. No one introduced me to the company. I didn't just walk through a back door opened by an influential acquaintance. By my own initiative, I successfully completed a 3-stage, extremely challenging and selective interview process. During these interviews, I presented my comprehensive and innovative strategic ideas for next-generation smart furniture products, and I was ultimately hired. That moment was the proudest moment of my life to date. I left my modest life in Iowa behind and moved to Asheville, rented a small riverside apartment with a peaceful view, and began my journey to realize my own American dream. But unfortunately, life doesn't go as smoothly and easily as planned. About 6 months after joining the company, I met the person who would completely change the course of my life, Charlotte Langford. She was the only daughter of the company's CEO, the legendary billionaire Mr. Benedict Langford, who had single-handedly built this massive empire from scratch, a man renowned in the industry for his strict rules and uncompromising stance. Charlotte worked in the company's product design department, and our paths crossed during an internal project meeting. I remember that day as clearly as if it were yesterday. The modern, glass-enclosed conference room flooded with sunlight, with everyone around the table discussing how to integrate AI into the seats more effectively. When I took the floor to present the market analysis data I had prepared, Charlotte, with her glossy golden hair and warm smile that lit up her face, turned to me and nodded, showing her appreciation for the ideas I had presented. After the meeting, she invited me for coffee to discuss my ideas in more detail. That coffee turned into an hour-long conversation. We started with business ideas, then found ourselves deeply engaged in conversations that extended to our favorite books and dreams. Charlotte wasn't the arrogant, spoiled rich girl I'd expected. On the contrary, she was incredibly intelligent, passionate about her work, and above all, kind-hearted. At the beginning of our relationship, we met secretly, fearing the inevitable gossip and misunderstandings that would ensue. But love arrived unexpectedly, like a cool breeze from the Appalachian Mountains, settling in our hearts. I truly love Charlotte with all my being. When I'm with her, I feel like the luckiest man in the world. But our fears came true, and the rumors spread like wildfire throughout the company. Everyone started whispering, "Hunter Briggs, that man is a complete manipulator. He's only interested in money." I started hearing these whispers behind my back in the cafeteria during lunch breaks. I could feel the questioning, even accusatory, stares of the people I encountered in the elevator. Everyone thought I was targeting the Langford family's incredible wealth, their lavish mansions, their yachts, and their vast stakes in a number of global brands. Initially, I tried to ignore these rumors, but these accusations stung. I had worked tirelessly, day and night, to propose a strategy for expanding into the European market that had increased company revenue by 15% in the first quarter alone. My performance was evident in the numbers. It was extraordinary, and everyone, especially my managers, agreed. But the promotion, it never came. My direct report, the middle-aged man who handed out blue beads to everyone, always found a way to cut me off. "You're doing well, Hunter, very well indeed," he would say with his fake smile. "But Mr. and Mrs. Langford don't want you to rise above them so quickly. You know what I mean?" This statement, this veiled threat, always made me feel helpless and powerless. Charlotte was aware of everything that was going on. She truly loved me and often had to defend me against her family's relentless scrutiny. At family dinners, she'd coax her father, Mr. Benedict, into thinking, "Hunter isn't what you think, Dad. He's a really good person." But he, with his silver beard and sharp knife-like eyes, would only grin wryly and say, "You're so naive, my beautiful girl. Men like him only follow the scent of money." His wife, Mrs. Eleanor, was even worse. She was a society lady who always wore designer dresses and looked down on me as if I were some disgusting insect. "Hunter, what department did you work in, Knockmall?" "Oh yes, someone in the strategy department. What an interesting career path. But I bet you're very busy, aren't you?" These kinds of subtle, venomous sarcasms and condescending remarks made me feel like an outsider, out of place. I'll never forget the first time I attended a family dinner at the Langford mansion. It was a typical summer evening in that vast mansion on the outskirts of Asheville. It was a palatial home with vast, lush gardens and a giant swimming pool that sparkled like a jewel under the garden lights. Charlotte held my hand tightly, pulling me inside, as if she feared I might flee at any moment. "I love you, and you'll see, they'll accept you eventually," she whispered in my ear. But the moment I stepped inside, I immediately felt the heavy, suffocating atmosphere. Mr. Benedict greeted me with a cold handshake. "Hunter, so you're here. I hope you didn't get lost finding your way to the mansion." At these words, the other relatives at the table chuckled softly, and I could only manage a strained, nervous smile. All they talked about during dinner was their European vacations, the latest stock market developments, stocks, and million-dollar business deals. I sat silently, having nothing to say about these matters. But Miss Eleanor wasn't about to leave me alone. Every now and then she'd turn to me and ask sarcastically, "Oh, Hunter, you must know a lot about those clever furniture pieces, don't you? Do you have a clever sofa like that in your house?" Then her condescending, irritating laugh would echo through the dining room again. I sat there, feeling utterly invisible, like a ghost lost in the midst of that elite world. It was moments like these that gripped my heart like a vice. I love Charlotte enough to endure all this, but her family's constant suspicions and humiliations are cutting into my self-esteem like a knife. At night, lying alone in bed in my small apartment overlooking the river, I often ask myself, am I really worthy? Or are they right? Am I just a manipulator? Charlotte tries to comfort me on the phone. "You're the best, most honest man I've ever known. Don't let them discourage you or break your spirit." She tells me about her lonely childhood in a wealthy family, her family's constant workload, and how the only person who truly understood her was her grandmother, who lived in Switzerland. "My grandmother absolutely loved you," Charlotte says, "but I'm not so sure. The pressure is mounting, and I feel like I'm walking a tightrope, with love on one side and a bottomless abyss on the other." My career wasn't exactly stellar either. Despite having prepared incredibly sharp and accurate data analysis reports that finally convinced the company to back out of a risky deal in South America, my name was still missing when the promotion list was announced. My boss patted me on the shoulder and said, "You need to prove more, Hunter. A little more patience." But I knew Mr. Benedict was behind it all. He didn't want his potential son-in-law to rise so quickly, beyond his control. I stayed in the office late, sometimes late into the night, working to prove myself, to prove I was worthy, but the whispers wouldn't stop. He's only dating Ms. Langford to get promoted. I tried to remain calm, to maintain my composure, but the anger and despair building inside me was eating me up. Charlotte saw how exhausted I was. She hugged me tightly and said, "I'll convince my father. Don't worry, we'll get through this together." It was these comforting words of hers that gave me the strength to get through these difficult months. I'm not a manipulator. I'm just an ordinary guy from Iowa trying to love a wonderful girl. But the world of the rich and powerful hides invisible traps around every corner, and I realized that I must fight every moment, every day, to preserve this fragile, scandal-ridden love between Charlotte and me, and to survive in this ruthless world. My life continued in a routine of mounting pressures and uncertainties. But then I received an invitation that would change everything. An invitation I didn't know at the time would lead to the most dramatic climax, the greatest test of my life. I remember that afternoon vividly. The sky above Asheville was thick with leaden clouds, as if foreshadowing a great storm. I was sitting at my desk in my office, staring out the window at the misty Appalachian Mountains, trying to focus on my new strategy report. Just then, my phone rang. It was Charlotte, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Darling, I've made up my mind," he said breathlessly. "I want to officially introduce you to my entire extended family at our upcoming annual barbecue. It's a huge deal for us. You know, we even have a very special VIP guest flying back from Europe this year. My grandmother. She's flying in from Switzerland just for this party, and I'm sure she'll be our biggest supporter." My heart was pounding in my chest, practically leaping from my chest. The Langford family's annual barbecue. I'd heard Charlotte mention it countless times. This wasn't the ordinary, intimate barbecue my family in Iowa used to have with their neighbors over beer and hot dogs in the backyard. No, this was a lavish affair set in the vast garden of Langford Mansion, with hundreds of socialites, refreshments prepared by Michelin-starred chefs, and conversations about million-dollar business deals floating around. And that VIP guest was Grandma Amelia Langford, the legendary woman Charlotte always spoke of with such reverence and affection. He lived in Switzerland, where he managed the largest portion of the family estate and was reportedly the only person who dared to speak out against Mr. Benedict, to challenge him. "My grandmother will absolutely adore you," Charlotte said hopefully. "She doesn't judge people by their appearances." But I wasn't at all sure of that. I was just an ordinary guy from Iowa, and now I had to face an entire extended family who would scrutinize me from head to toe, judging my every move. The pressure was crashing down on me like giant ocean waves, making it hard to breathe. Was this my chance to prove myself to them, or was this the final, cruelest trap they had set to remove me from Charlotte's life forever? A few days later, the official invitation arrived. It wasn't a simple email or text message, but a luxurious handwritten letter delivered to my door by special courier, express courier. The envelope was made of thick, textured paper, emblazoned with a gold lion on a blue background, the Langford family crest. My hands trembling slightly, my heart pounding in my ears, I opened it. Inside was a formal invitation printed in bright gold letters. "We cordially invite the esteemed Mr. Hunter Briggs to our annual summer barbecue, to be held at Langford Manor on July 15th at 3 p.m. We would be honored by your presence." Beneath it was Charlotte's signature and a small handwritten note. "I love you, and this will be our turning point. Please come." I collapsed on the couch. I felt a crushing pressure on my chest, as if a rock weighed a ton. I imagined myself walking into that mansion perfectly, like the perfect gentleman. But even the slightest mistake, the slightest slip-up, would lead everyone, especially Charlotte's family, to use it as leverage to separate me from her. So I decided to make the most meticulous preparations of my life. This was a war, and I had to win. The next morning, I went to the chic shopping mall in Asheville, where the high-end fashion stores gathered. Forking over half my monthly salary, I rented a luxurious silver-gray suit made of the finest Italian wool. When the salesman said, "You look like a true gentleman, sir," I just tried to smile nervously. I also bought shiny patent leather shoes, a pure silk tie, and even borrowed an expensive watch from a friend to appear even more elegant and wealthy. For days, I practiced in front of the mirror. I practiced how to greet them, how to smile, how to respond intelligently to Miss Eleanor's potentially sarcastic questions. I spent hours muttering phrases like, "Dear Mr. Benedict, I'm so honored to be here," to myself. To avoid any setbacks, my plan was to arrive at 2 p.m., a full hour before the party started. I studied the map over and over, meticulously calculating the travel time from my apartment to that mansion in the suburbs, even factoring in any potential traffic jams. Charlotte constantly sent me encouraging messages. "You're going to wow them. I'm so proud of you." But deep down, I was so nervous. My hands and feet were practically freezing. This wasn't just a party. It was a final exam, a final decision. The day of the party began with a brilliant sun in Asheville, but inside, my heart was filled with dark clouds. I put on the expensive suit I'd rented, carefully combed my hair, and sprayed on a light spritz of cologne, all to look like I belonged in that world, like a Langford family member. Leaving the city center, I set off down the winding roads through the lush pine forests. Charlotte and I's favorite song was playing on the radio, and an involuntary smile crept across my face as I remembered the wonderful times we'd shared with her. Our first dates. I can do this, I told myself. I have to. But then, just a few miles from the mansion, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, I noticed an elderly woman with silver hair standing on the sidewalk. She looked dazed and exhausted. She wore an old, outdated coat, held a small handbag, and her eyes wandered around as if lost. My heart sank. Judging by her wrinkled skin and tired posture, she looked about 80, and as I slowed my car, she waved at me. Despite knowing I had a busy and critical schedule, I pulled over, overcome by conscience. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I asked through the car window. Her eyes looked at me, blurry. "I can't remember the way home. I think I'm lost." Her voice was vague and shaky, and I immediately realized she was showing signs of Alzheimer's. She couldn't even remember her own name, only constantly talking about a house with a rose garden. I glanced at my watch. The party was still over an hour away. "I can help right now. I can't leave her like this," I thought. My conscience would never let me leave her there, helpless. My family in Iowa had taught me that helping others, even if it meant making a personal sacrifice, was the most important thing in life. I got out of the car, my rented suit fluttering gently in the wind, and I tried to gently reassure her. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll help you find your way." We began walking around the neighborhood, supporting her slow, shaky steps. She was telling me incoherent stories about an old house and a daughter who lived far away. I asked nearby neighbors and called the local police to check for missing persons reports, but I couldn't find any immediate leads. Time was flying by, my heart pounding with anxiety. I'm going to be late, I thought to myself. Everything's going to be ruined. But looking at that trembling, helpless old woman's face, I couldn't bear to leave her. Suddenly, a light rain began to fall. Asheville's infamous summer showers, not too heavy, but enough to soak everything. My rented suit was beginning to get dirty, its expensive fabric collecting mud spattered from the wet roads. My shiny patent leather shoes were caked with mud, and my hair was a tangled mess from the wind and rain. I tried to shield him with my own jacket, but in the process, I got soaked myself. "That's very kind of you, young man," the old woman murmured, tightening her grip on my hand. Finally, after driving around the neighborhood for about 40 minutes, she suddenly stopped in front of a charming little house with a rose garden. "This is it. This is my home," she exclaimed, her eyes briefly sparkling with joy. She thanked me repeatedly and sincerely. "Young man, God bless you. You saved me." I smiled, even though my heart was filled with anxiety. "Take care, ma'am." I ran back to the car and glanced at the clock in panic. Even according to my early arrival plan, I was almost 40 minutes late. With the rain still drizzling, my heart pounding in my chest, I sped toward the mansion. I'm going to be late, and in this state. How can I meet them in this state? I was so nervous that my hands were shaking as they gripped the steering wheel. The elegant, formal print on the invitation had now turned into genuine fear in my mind. Was this the biggest mistake of my life? Or was fate testing me cruelly? The road to the Langford mansion seemed to stretch on forever. The imposing canopies of pine trees lining both sides of the road, blurred behind a thin veil of rain, rushing past the car windows, but I was no longer in the mood to admire Asheville's captivating beauty. The luxurious suit I'd painstakingly rented, paying nearly a month's salary, was now soaked, wrinkled, and covered in mud stains from the muddy streets. My patent leather shoes, once shiny as mirrors, were as dirty as if I'd walked through a muddy field after a heavy downpour in Iowa. My hair was a complete mess. Raindrops were running down my forehead and cheeks, and I could smell the pungent, musty dampness rising from my wet clothes. "I look like a bum," I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were turning white. I imagined myself entering that lavish party venue like this. Mr. Benedict's usual condescending stares, the high society guests' whispers behind my back, their mocking giggles, and Charlotte. Oh, Charlotte, what would she think? I'd promised her I'd arrive early, prove myself, ingratiate myself with her family. What would happen now? Just one moment of kindness, one single act of kindness, and everything was about to fall apart. I pressed the gas pedal even harder, the car hurtling along the treacherous mountain curves, the tires squealing on the slick asphalt. My heart was beating erratically and violently, like a time bomb about to explode. I remembered the invitation in that handwritten letter, punctuality, politeness, the formal dress code. Those words echoed in my mind now like curses. Mr. Benedict and Miss Eleanor would use this situation mercilessly to attack me, humiliate me, and prove once again that I was unworthy of their daughter. For a moment, I considered turning around, going home, taking a hot shower, and sending Charlotte an apology text explaining the situation. But no, I couldn't. Charlotte had fought for me so many times, defended me in front of her family. If I gave up now, I would lose her forever. My father in Iowa had once told me, no matter what, always be yourself, son. And I wasn't one to abandon someone in need by the wayside. I took a deep breath, tried to calm myself, tried to slow my heart. I'll explain, I'll tell you everything, they'll understand. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't understand, wouldn't want to understand. The Langford mansion loomed before me in all its grandeur. It was a massive structure with massive white stone columns, perfectly manicured, lush gardens, and a swimming pool that sparkled like a diamond under the lights despite the fine rain. The imposing iron gates, adorned with the family's golden lion emblem, rose like an impenetrable barrier between my ordinary world and theirs. I stopped the car, engine still running, in front of the gate and stared at it for a moment. The clock on the dashboard read 3:35 p.m. Almost 40 minutes had passed since the reception. And here I was. God, I felt like I'd just survived a car accident. Should I go home, or should I go inside and face my fate? This indecision tore through my soul like two monsters grappling with each other. Part of me was fear. Come back, Hunter. Don't humiliate yourself any further. The other part was love. Charlotte is waiting for you. She needs you there by her side. I shut off the engine and stepped out into the rain, ignoring the cold water seeping through my thin jacket and soaking into my skin. My hand trembled as I rang the doorbell. "I have to do this," I whispered to myself. The doorman, an older man in a black uniform, eyed me suspiciously through the small viewing window. He must have been used to elegant guests arriving in limousines in the latest fashions, not a disheveled, muddy man like me. "Your name?" he asked briefly and directly. "Hunter Briggs. I'm invited to a barbecue." I handed him the invitation, wrinkled and damp from the rain. He checked my name on his list, then shook his head in annoyance. "You're late, and what's the big deal?" I swallowed. "I had something happen on the way. Please let me in." He sighed, confirmed my identity with someone inside on the phone, and then reluctantly opened the door, which creaked open. "Go in, but don't make a mess." The door slammed shut behind me, and I trudged toward the garden, each step as if I were carrying a boulder on my back. My heart was pounding so hard that my ears were ringing with the intensity of anxiety. It was a door of judgment, and I was plummeting headfirst into hell. The spacious party area, covered with large white tents erected to protect from the rain, was overflowing with guests. The delicious aroma of grilled meat mingled with the sound of lively conversation and laughter. Soft, mellifluous jazz music echoed from the speakers. Hundreds of people, business leaders, socialites, and distant relatives of the Langford family, were gathered around long banquet tables, chatting happily with glasses of sparkling wine in hand. But as I stepped through the entrance, the joyous atmosphere abruptly ceased, as if someone had flicked an invisible switch. The entire place fell into a deep silence. Everyone turned to look at me. Amidst that sea of elegance, a young man walked alone, late, neglected, and disheveled. My suit was dirty, my shoes muddy, my hair disheveled. I was like a mud spatter on a perfect oil painting. Puzzled, blank stares focused on me. A few people covered their mouths and chuckled softly. Whispers like, "Who is that? He looks like a beggar," reached my ears. My heart constricted again, my face burning with shame. I wanted to turn and run, but my feet felt nailed to the ground. I couldn't move. Charlotte was the first to react. She rushed to me from the main table, her pale blue dress billowing, her eyes red with worry. "Hunter, what happened to you? I called you countless times, but I couldn't reach you." Her voice trembled with worry, but there was no trace of reproach in it. She gripped my hand tightly, squeezing it gently, as if to give me strength. "I'm so worried. What happened? What's wrong with you?" "It's raining heavily," I whispered urgently. "On the road. I met an old woman lost on the road. I couldn't just leave her." Charlotte nodded, her eyes sparkling with gratitude for a moment. "I knew it. You're so kind. Don't worry, I'm here." In the midst of that storm, my heart warmed, if only for a moment. But then Mr. Benedict approached, his face flushed with anger. He was tall, his silver beard gleaming in the lights, and his eyes, as always, were as sharp as knives. "Hunter Briggs, you're late, and what the hell is this? Is this the kind of respect you show our family?" he shouted, his voice cracking like a whip across the entire venue, silencing everyone once again. Rainwater was still dripping from my hair, and I felt as helpless and small as a scolded child. Mr. Benedict continued his tirade, slamming me in front of the entire crowd and hurling insults at me. "Who do you think you are? You're a kid from Iowa who dated my daughter purely for a fortune hunt, and now you dare show up at our party looking so late and disheveled? We politely invited you here, told you to wear formal attire. What about you? This is clear proof of who you are. You're not worthy of this family." Those words stabbed into my heart like daggers, and the pain was so intense I nearly collapsed. The crowd began to murmur among themselves. A few nodded in agreement. Suppressed chuckles rose from a corner. His wife, Mrs. Eleanor, stood beside him in her sumptuous dress, surveying me from head to toe with a look of disdain. She said nothing, but that look, as if she were staring at a disgusting insect, was worse than 1,000 words. "A great disappointment indeed," she whispered, her lips curling into a sneer, just loud enough for me to hear. My heart was pounding wildly, the tension reaching its peak. I wanted to tell her something about the old woman, to defend myself, but the words were stuck in my throat. Charlotte tried to intervene. "Father, please. She had an incident on the road. Please listen to her." But Mr. Benedict dismissed him harshly. "An incident? That's the classic excuse of an irresponsible and incompetent fool." I felt my world spinning around me, shame and anger mixed. This was the moment I'd feared most. Being judged publicly, and once again pushed aside. Was this the end, or was something even worse in store for me? I didn't know, but in that moment, I just wanted to evaporate and vanish. Suddenly, a shrill beep echoed from the sound system, and the massive projection screen in the center of the party venue, previously used to present a nostalgic slideshow about the Langford family's past, suddenly lit up. The blinding white light pierced the tense atmosphere like a sword, causing everyone to flinch and reflexively turn their heads toward the screen. Mr. Benedict interrupted. Miss Eleanor frowned, and the crowd fell into a profound silence once again. My heart still pounding, I glanced up at the screen, not understanding what was happening. And just then, a video started playing. The images were crystal clear, as if professionally shot, and the audio was crystal clear. I was there on the screen. I saw myself, in my silver gray suit, now disheveled, strolling through that quiet suburban neighborhood, supporting the silver-haired old woman by the arm. The shot was from above, perhaps from a drone or hidden camera that captured every detail perfectly. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll help you find your way." I could be heard reassuring her. The old woman's incoherent murmurs about the house with the rose garden, the rain pouring down on us, my soaked clothes, my mud-caked shoes, and when she finally found her house, she cried out, "You saved me!" over and over again, thanking me. The sound was so clear I could even hear the patter of the rain and the tremor of my own voice with anxiety and urgency. I was frozen, as if I'd turned into an ice sculpture. "What's this?" I whispered, my eyes fixated on the screen. How could this be? Who filmed this? Why? My head was spinning with 1,000 questions, my anxiety giving way to profound bewilderment. Was this a bad joke, or was someone trying to further humiliate me, to prove my irresponsibility by revealing the ridiculous reason for my delay? But then, when the video ended and I was shown running to the car, the entire atmosphere in the party venue changed. Everyone was in shock, chatter buzzing like a beehive. "Oh my God, she helped a lost old lady. That's why her dress was dirty. So who filmed this?" Those mocking, condescending looks had now turned to surprise, and even a few to admiration. Charlotte gripped my hand even tighter, her face pale with astonishment. Her voice trembling, she turned to me and whispered, "Hunter, that old lady you helped is the most important guest at today's party. This is my grandmother, Amelia Langford, back from Switzerland." My heart felt as if it had stopped. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Grandmother Amelia Langford. That frail, helpless old woman, lost in Alzheimer's symptoms, the powerful woman who held the sway of the family's inheritance, the one before whom even Mr. Benedict had to bow. I couldn't believe it. My mouth was agape, emotions surging through me like a tsunami. At that moment, an elegant figure emerged from the mansion, walking toward us with slow but profoundly dignified steps. That old woman, no, Mrs. Amelia Langford, had completely transformed. She was no longer the dazed, frail woman. She wore a long, elegant, pale blue dress, her silver hair carefully pulled back into a chic bun, a sparkling pearl necklace glittering around her neck, and she looked like a true European aristocrat. A warm smile graced her face as she stepped into the center of the party hall under the twinkling lights, and everyone fell respectfully silent once more. She had lived in Switzerland for decades, managing the family's vast and complex holdings, and it was clear from her appearance that even Mr. Benedict had to bow to her. He stood before me, his eyes no longer shining with illness, but with profound emotion. "This young man," he said, taking the microphone, his voice echoing clearly and powerfully throughout the room, "helped me without knowing who I was, simply because I needed him. He didn't care for a moment about the time he was running late or his own appearance." That's the character of a true Langford family member. The place buzzed again, but this time the buzz was composed of murmurs of approval and appreciation. Mr. Benedict and Miss Eleanor looked at each other, their faces pale and expressionless, as if they'd been slapped hard. Charlotte's family couldn't stay silent. Mr. Benedict stepped forward, his voice slightly shrill. "Mother, why did you do this? What kind of test is this?" Miss Eleanor interjected, her voice irritated and high-pitched. "You pretended to be lost, and you even had drones filming every moment. Why didn't you tell us anything beforehand?" Miss Amelia smiled slightly at them and turned to them with sharp yet compassionate eyes. Her voice was slow and calm, as if telling a fairy tale. "I heard Charlotte tell me a lot about this young man named Hunter Briggs. He told me how you persecuted him because of his ordinary background, how you constantly belittled and humiliated him. You thought he was a manipulator, a gold digger, but I wanted to see for myself to confirm the truth. So when I returned to the country, I devised this little game to test my future grandson. I hired a secret film crew to record the whole thing and pretended to be lost on purpose. If he had ignored me and continued on his way because he was afraid of being late or getting dirty, then perhaps you were right. He wasn't worthy of this family. But look, he chose kindness and humanity, even though he knew he would get into serious trouble." The people around me nodded in agreement, and I felt a warm current flow through my heart, a weight lifting from my shoulders. Miss Amelia turned to Charlotte and lovingly stroked her hair. "My beautiful grandson Hunter is a brilliant, kind-hearted young man worthy of you. From now on, I will be your biggest supporter." I was still in shock, but Charlotte hugged me tightly, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. Miss Amelia invited me to the small stage set up in the center of the room. "Hunter, raise your voice. Everyone wants to hear a few words from you." My heart was pounding wildly again, but this time not from fear, but from an indescribable emotion. I stepped forward, clutching the microphone with trembling hands, and spoke humbly. I simply did what everyone should do: help someone in need, no matter who they are. I love Charlotte not for her family or her wealth, but simply for who she is, for her heart. Thank you, Miss Amelia. I am grateful for everything. My words were simple and sincere, and the place erupted in thunderous applause. Those condescending looks had now given way to respect, and even Mr. Benedict, though his face was set, was applauding. The atmosphere of the barbecue party changed completely after that speech. Everyone joined in, joyful, laughing, the delicious aroma of grilled meat wafting through the air. I sat next to Charlotte and Miss Amelia at the main table, feeling as if I were in a surreal dream. My grandmother listened to our touching love story, how we met at a project meeting, our romantic walks along the French Broad River on a rainy day, and how Charlotte defended me in front of her family. With a warm smile, she said, "You're both just like me and your grandfather when we were young, a true love blossoming between two worlds." Then, while everyone was busy eating and chatting, she pulled Charlotte and me into a quiet corner and told me a little secret about her beloved granddaughter. "Hunter, you should know that Charlotte had previously been in a relationship forced upon her by her parents. He was a young man from a wealthy family, considered appropriate by their status, but Charlotte never loved him. I knew her life would be ruined and miserable if she married someone she didn't love, so I intervened and prevented that marriage." Charlotte blushed and hugged her grandmother. "Grandma, I love you the most." I held Charlotte's hand, my emotions welling up inside me. It turned out she, just like me, had endured great pressures and hardships. That moment made me realize once again how full of surprises life is. I had gone from being oppressed, despised, and invisible to someone now known and respected. As Miss Amelia whispered in my ear, "You passed the exam with flying colors. Now take good care of Charlotte." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I could only nod. The party continued late into the night, with cheerful jazz music and moving stories. Mr. Benedict avoided me, but his gaze had changed. The condescending expression was gone. Miss Eleanor, on the other hand, was rather strange, only nodding slightly when I greeted her. Charlotte, however, was radiant with happiness. "Look, I told you, everything will be fine." I hugged him tightly, feeling as if a door to heaven had opened before me. The days that followed that fateful barbecue changed everything with dizzying speed, as if the cool mountain winds of Asheville had blown away the thick fog that had shrouded my life. Back in my small apartment on the banks of the French Broad River, I lay in bed, my eyes wide open, my mind still filled with incredible images of that evening. My unexpected savior, Miss Amelia, had not only saved me from the greatest humiliation of my life, but had also opened a brand new chapter in this challenging journey within the Langford family. The next morning, as the sun rose brightly over the Appalachian Mountains, I received a call from Charlotte. Her voice was more excited than ever. "My dear, my grandmother had a long talk with my father. She asked him to reconsider promoting you at the company. That young man is valuable, and no one will be allowed to treat him unfairly or pressure him anymore," she said. My heart was pounding with a strange mix of anxiety and hope. With her unwavering authority from Switzerland, Miss Amelia used her powerful voice to shift the entire dynamic. A few weeks later, that good news exploded like a bombshell at the company. I was sitting in my strategy office, gazing out the window at the lazily flowing river, trying to focus on a market analysis report I was preparing for the Asian market, when my direct report called me into his office. The middle-aged sycophantic man who had previously blocked my path at every opportunity now looked at me with a forced fake smile. "Hunter, congratulations. The board has decided to promote you to marketing manager." I was stunned, my ears ringing. Marketing manager, the prestigious position many at the company dreamed of, where I could lead global campaigns for Langford International's smart furniture brands. This wasn't just a simple step. It was a recognition I'd fought for months, a recognition I knew I deserved. I remembered those sleepless nights at work, the brilliant ideas I'd had dismissed with, "You're not ready yet." Now, everything had turned upside down. As soon as Charlotte heard the news, she ran into my office and hugged me tightly in the middle of the hallway, in full view of everyone. "I knew it. You deserve it." Tears of joy streamed down her face, and I could feel the indescribable pride welling up in her heart. "I knew I chose the right person," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. News of the promotion spread like wildfire through the company. The Langford Insider, the internal newsletter that usually featured company achievements and announcements, dedicated its entire front page to congratulating me. The boldface headline read, "From young strategist to marketing manager, Hunter Briggs, a success story of kindness and talent." The article recounted that famous barbecue in exquisite detail. It highlighted how I helped Miss Amelia without even knowing who she was, and how this act of kindness radically changed her perception of leadership. They even quoted Mr. Benedict, "Hunter has proven his worth not only through his work, but also through his character." My heart pounding, I read the article, feeling like I was starring in a Hollywood movie. Colleagues who had once whispered, "Gold Hunter," behind my back were now patting me on the back and patting me on the shoulder. "You're amazing, Hunter. We're proud of your success." A few even approached me and offered veiled apologies. "We misunderstood you, sorry." I smiled sincerely, without holding a grudge, because I knew that real change comes from within and how difficult it is to break people's judgments. And now, I had the chance to prove myself once again, this time through my work. In my new position, I dove into the job like a wild horse unleashed. I fully dedicated myself to delivering creative and innovative marketing solutions I'd only dared to dream of before. Leading the smart home development team, I launched brand new campaigns, specifically targeting emerging markets like Asia and Africa, integrating artificial intelligence into furniture to make people's lives easier. The company continued to grow steadily, and I began to feel no longer an outsider, but a true part of this vast empire. Every morning, I would wake up, gazing out my window at the French Broad River, reflecting on my arduous journey from Iowa, and my heart would fill with gratitude. But a slight anxiety wouldn't subside. Could I maintain this success, or would the pressures of new responsibilities overwhelm me? The biggest change came from Mr. Benedict and Ms. Eleanor. Their attitude toward me began to shift visibly toward the positive, but it happened gradually and without direct apology. At a leadership meeting, Mr. Benedict publicly praised an idea I'd presented. "Hunter, your Africa strategy makes perfect sense. Keep it up." His gaze was warmer now, his sharp, razor-sharp expression gone. Charlotte and I began to enjoy our happy moments to the fullest, no longer worried about interference or gossip. We walked hand in hand along the riverbank, and she hugged me tightly. "You're my hero," she said. These words of pride made me stronger, but they also increased the pressure and responsibility on me. I knew I had to constantly prove myself to be worthy of them, especially Charlotte. The company grew, and I led larger projects, like collaborating with a startup to produce eco-friendly furniture in Singapore and organizing a major charity campaign in South Africa that donated smart furniture to schools in impoverished areas. Each new achievement was a dramatic part of my transformation from invisible to respected leader. But I always remembered that party and Miss Amelia with special gratitude. She would call regularly from Switzerland, asking questions about both my work and our relationship with a true grandmotherly tenderness. "My son, always guard your kind and pure heart," she would say, her voice warm even over the phone line. Those calls made me feel no longer a stranger, but a true part of the Langford family. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. Exactly 1 year after that fateful barbecue, my life entered a whole new era, filled with drama and emotion. I remember those months of preparing for our wedding as clearly as yesterday. It was a journey no less nerve-wracking and stressful than the day I first stepped onto the Langford estate with trepidation. Charlotte and I decided to get married on a bright Asheville summer day, when the leaves in the Appalachian Mountains were the most vibrant green and the air held a faint scent of wildflowers. We spent hours, days, debating every detail, from the wedding flowers and the guest list to the menu and the speeches. I was deeply anxious because this wasn't just our wedding. This was a huge and important event for the Langford family as well. "Are you scared?" Charlotte asked one evening, as we sat side by side on my apartment balcony, gazing at the French Broad River shimmering in the moonlight. "Yes, I'm afraid," I admitted honestly, I'm afraid your family still hasn't fully and wholeheartedly accepted me." He laughed and gave me a gentle, loving kiss on the cheek. "They've changed now, my dear, and my grandmother will be with us too." His words brought me some relief, but that unceasing anxiety still swelled within me like the waves of the sea. Would everything go well, or would another misfortune occur that would thrust me back into those days of invisibility and exclusion? The wedding took place in grand style at Langford Manor, the very place I'd almost fled from a year earlier. The manor's grounds were lavishly decorated, with enormous white tents spread across the lush green lawns, white roses, Charlotte's favorite flowers, carefully arranged everywhere, and an outdoor stage overlooking the majestic mountains. Hundreds of guests, including extended family from distant relatives in Europe to Langford International's global business partners, were gathered. The atmosphere was vibrant and cheerful from the early morning hours, with the soft music played by a live band and the aromas of delicious food wafting from the open-air kitchen. I stood in the dressing room in a tailored white suit, my hands trembling as I tied my tie. "I'm about to be Charlotte's husband," I whispered to myself, my heart pounding in my chest. My anxiety surged as I thought about the long and arduous journey I'd taken to get here. I'd transformed from an ordinary guy from Iowa, labeled a gold digger, to someone now standing smack dab in the middle of this exclusive, glittering world. Charlotte texted me, "I love you. Everything will be perfect today." I smiled, but my heart still pounded with anxiety. Would Mr. Benedict really look at me differently now? Miss Amelia officiated the ceremony. This decision surprised everyone, but it meant a lot to us. She had arrived from Switzerland a week early and stayed at the mansion to personally assist with our preparations. Her silver hair was pulled back into a stylish bun, and she looked as elegant and regal as ever, with that warm smile on her face. During the fitting, her eyes sparkled with happiness, and she said, "I'm so happy to see you two together like this." Benedict and Eleanor, though still a bit reserved and conservative, were now much warmer towards me. Benedict still frowned slightly at the mention of my humble background, but he had clearly accepted me. Mr. Benedict personally signed a check for a significant portion of the wedding expenses, and Miss Eleanor helped Charlotte choose the wedding dress of her dreams from a renowned designer in Paris. The evening before the wedding, Mr. Benedict came to me and said, "Hunter, you look well," his voice a little awkward but sincere. I nodded, overcome with emotion. It was a tacit forgiveness after months of relentless pressure. Miss Eleanor smiled when she saw me trying on the suit. "You look like a true gentleman." These small but meaningful changes filled me with a strange mixture of anxiety and joy, as if the last door had opened before me. One of the most touching moments was when I invited my own family from Iowa to the wedding. My family, simple and humble country folk who had never set foot in such luxurious and ornate places before, flew to Asheville for the first time in their lives. I was terrified, afraid they would feel outcast and alienated amidst the high society crowd. But when they arrived at the mansion, everything took on an unexpectedly warm and welcoming atmosphere. My father, wearing his old but immaculate suit, tapped me on the shoulder. "Son, I'm so proud of you." My mother burst into tears when she saw Charlotte in her wedding dress and hugged her tightly. "My beautiful bride, you're like an angel." To my surprise, they were greeted with such warmth. Miss Amelia hugged my mother as if she were one of her own family, telling funny stories about her childhood in Europe to put her at ease. Mr. Benedict shook my father's hand and talked to him about business and engineering. "Mr. Briggs, Hunter has clearly learned a lot from you." That moment made the wedding even more emotional and meaningful, like a bridge between two different worlds, humble and welcoming Iowa and glamorous and reserved Asheville. My heart clenched with emotion as I saw my family sitting among the guests, happily looking around and smiling. I would be nothing without them. I whispered to Charlotte. She nodded, and her eyes welled with tears. They're my family now, too. The ceremony began at that magical sunset hour as the sun slowly receded behind the mountains, painting the sky a deep crimson. Miss Amelia stood on stage, her voice echoing from the microphone throughout the garden. Today we witness the true love between Hunter and Charlotte, a pure love that transcends all obstacles and prejudices. We exchanged rings and kissed amidst enthusiastic applause. A joyful and warm atmosphere permeated the entire place. Guests chatted and laughed, children ran around on the grass, and a band played romantic love songs. The reception that followed was a feast of flavors. Grilled meats, a staple of traditional barbecues, were paired with luxurious European dishes and the finest wines from the family's Swiss vineyards. Everyone danced under the sparkling lights, and I pulled Charlotte onto the dance floor, held her in my arms, and spun her slowly. "You're my wife now," she laughed, her voice trembling with joy. "Forever." In the middle of the reception, Miss Amelia suddenly stepped onto the stage, grabbed the microphone, and announced loudly, "Hunter and Charlotte, your grandmother is giving you an oceanfront villa in Carolina as a wedding gift, along with an unforgettable honeymoon trip to Europe." Applause and congratulations echoed throughout the room, and everyone shouted joyfully in our direction. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her tightly, my voice muffled. "Grandma, I don't know what to say." Charlotte was shedding tears of joy. "We truly love you so much." A beach villa I'd never even dared to dream of, and a honeymoon in the most romantic places on earth. But this gift wasn't just a material gift, it was a divine blessing from her, the complete and utter recognition I'd longed for in this family. Mr. Benedict nodded slightly in agreement, and Miss Eleanor smiled back. Although there was still a touch of shyness on his face, they had accepted us, accepted me. My hands trembled with emotion at that moment, because this wasn't just the end of months of silent, exhausting struggle. It was the beginning of a truly happy, peaceful, and loving chapter in my life. The wedding continued with joy and warmth late into the night. We cut the multi-tiered cake, adorned with white frosting and roses, amidst laughter. My family shared funny childhood memories with everyone, bringing laughter to the crowd. Hunter once fell off his bike while chasing the neighbor's dog and crashed into a tree. Charlotte interjected, "Now he's just chasing me." Miss Amelia spoke of her grandfather, who had built the family from the ground up, and of their love story. Love is the foundation of everything, just like Hunter and Charlotte today. The atmosphere was relaxed. We were now one big, happy family, with no invisible barriers between us. I felt this transformation in my bones. My colleagues from the company patted me on the shoulder and offered their warmest congratulations. The Langford family's distant relatives shook my hand as if we'd known each other for years. The initial overwhelming anxiety had completely vanished, replaced by a vibrant joy. But deep inside, there was still a tinge of anxiety. Would this happiness last forever? Most of the guests had left, leaving only the dim lights and the fading music. Mr. Benedict led me out onto the mansion's expansive balcony. The moon shone like a silver tray over the mountains, a cool breeze caressing our faces. He handed me my last glass of wine, his voice low and sincere. "Hunter, my son-in-law, I hope you forgive me for what I did before. I know I was very stubborn and prejudiced, but now I see you're a truly good person. Take care of Charlotte, okay?" His words were like a final, warming flame. It might not have been a direct apology, but it was enough to make my heart clench with emotion. I looked into his eyes, which shone in the moonlight. "Dad, I forgive you, and I promise to love Charlotte forever and make her happy." We shook hands, genuinely for the first time. She patted my shoulder. "Welcome to the family, son." At that moment, I felt all the pressure melt away, leaving only pure, unadulterated happiness. After the wedding, Charlotte and I embarked on a brand new chapter in our lives, our unforgettable European honeymoon. It was a generous and luxurious gift from Miss Amelia. First, we flew to Paris, the city of love, with its narrow cobblestone streets and the Eiffel Tower sparkling like a jewel under the nightlights. I remember the moment the plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport vividly. Charlotte's hand was clasped tightly in mine, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Hunter, my dear, this is our true beginning. No more worries." My heart was still pounding with a slight anxiety. This was my first time leaving the United States, and everything around me felt like a new, dramatic, and surreal dream. We stayed at a luxurious 5-star hotel on the banks of the Seine River, in a suite with a balcony overlooking the gently flowing water. In the early days, we wandered hand in hand through the corridors of the Louvre, admiring the Mona Lisa. I turned to Charlotte and whispered, You're even more beautiful than that painting." She hugged me tightly and laughed. "You're a complete idiot, but that's exactly why I love you." We savored freshly baked croissants in the morning, bitter coffees in charming roadside cafes, and romantic dinners with red wine. Every moment was filled with emotion and love, as if our love were blossoming anew in the romantic atmosphere of ancient Europe. After Paris, we went to Rome, which captivated me with its ancient ruins and historical fabric. We tossed coins into the Trevi Fountain, wishing for eternal happiness, and strolled among the imposing ruins of the Colosseum under the bright summer sun. Charlotte enthusiastically shared the city's history with me. "Can you imagine this place used to be a bloody arena where gladiators fought?" I nodded, but my mind was on the future, a bright future where everyone supported us, with nothing standing in our way. Charlotte's family had completely accepted me now. Mr. Benedict even sent us a congratulatory email during the trip. "Have fun, both of you. I'm proud of you." Ms. Eleanor video called us to ask about the weather in Europe and the food we were eating. My colleagues at Langford International were constantly texting, "Congratulations to our newlywed boss." And Ms. Amelia from Switzerland called every week without exception. "Where are you now? Tell me everything." This outpouring of support made me feel strong, but it also fueled a slight anxiety. Could we build a perfect life? In Rome, we began planning our future. One evening, sitting on the balcony of our hotel overlooking the Vatican, Charlotte rested her head on my shoulder. "Dear Hunter, what are we going to do when we get back to the States?" she asked. I thought for a moment, and my heart began to race as the idea dawned on me. "We'll set up a charity fund in Miss Amelia's name. We'll focus on helping the lonely and needy elderly, just like I once did for your grandmother." Charlotte looked up, her eyes shining. "That's a great idea. Grandma will be proud. We could use the money from the beach villa to get started. We could organize medical support, housing, and even smart furniture technology programs specifically for them to make their lives easier." We spent hours working on the idea, sketching out plans. We set goals like partnering with Langford International to sponsor products, inviting Alzheimer's specialists to join the project, and expanding nationwide. The idea excited me. This wasn't just a charity. It was our way of giving back to life and proving that kindness and goodness always spread exponentially. Charlotte hugged me. "You're a wonderful man. Our future is going to be bright and bright." Our trip continued to Switzerland, where Miss Amelia invited us to her home, a historic villa on the shores of Lake Geneva, overlooking lush vineyards and the snow-capped Alps. She met us at the airport and gave us both a warm hug. "Welcome, my children. I've been waiting for this day for a long time." We stayed there for a week, enjoying cheese fondue and local wines and taking long walks by the lake in the soft autumn sunshine. Miss Amelia told us old family stories. "Your grandfather started from nothing, just like you, Hunter." The idea of a man from Iowa, an outcast, now living here in this historic villa as a full-fledged family member was heartwarming. We told her about our idea for a charity fund. "I'm all for it. Use my name, the Amelia Foundation for Seniors," she said, her eyes sparkling with joy. Charlotte and I planned the details, starting with initial donations from the family, organizing fundraisers in Asheville, and collaborating with nonprofit organizations. My anxiety grew as I considered the challenges ahead. Would we succeed? But with everyone's support, I believed we could make it. Charlotte and I embraced in the moonlight on a yacht we'd rented on Lake Geneva. "Dear Hunter, I want to have children now, to start a happy little family." My heart was racing, a mixture of joy and anxiety. "I do too. We'll be great parents." We envisioned a life in our oceanfront villa, waking to the sound of the waves, telling our children the story of our own journey of love at night. That future looked truly bright. I would continue to lead the marketing department and expand Langford into Europe. Charlotte would focus on environmentally friendly product design, and the charity fund we would establish would be our most precious legacy to leave to this world. But that slight anxiety was always there, like a whisper. Life, like that barbecue a year ago, was always full of surprises. When we returned to the U.S., we set about establishing the charity fund with great enthusiasm and excitement, as if all the previous challenges and trials had been stepping stones to this sacred mission. Upon landing in Asheville, where the mountain air still carries the faint, fresh scent of pine and the French Broad River flows with its usual laziness, we rented a small, cozy office downtown. It was a peaceful, comfortable space with light wood walls and large windows overlooking the majestic Appalachian Mountains. We hired a trusted local attorney who meticulously handled all the legal paperwork, from business licenses to tax preparations, ensuring everything was as solid and secure as a house's foundation. Miss Amelia from Switzerland immediately transferred the startup funds to our account with a warm message. "Go ahead, my dears. I'm so proud of your idea." Building on this funding, we held the fund's launch event at a luxurious hall on the outskirts of town, inviting the entire Langford family, our colleagues at the firm, and the city's leading figures. Those faces that had once whispered behind my back, condescending, now surrounded me with eyes filled with curiosity and admiration. Mr. Benedict, with his silver beard and commanding voice, stepped onto the stage to deliver the speech. "I'm so proud of my son-in-law and daughter. They're not only raising a happy family, but they're also spreading kindness and goodness throughout society." In her familiar aristocratic style, Ms. Eleanor invited more high society guests, transforming the event into a vibrant get-together. Our fund focuses on supporting elderly people living alone, providing them with smart furniture equipped with sensors that detect falls and automatically summon help, organizing regular visits with young volunteers, reading them heartwarming stories, and providing in-depth support to Alzheimer's patients through free medical consultations and workshops. Every time I think of this backdrop, I remember that moment on that rainy day when Miss Amelia seemed lost, her delicate appearance, yet her intelligent, sparkling eyes. I think of it more than I tell myself. Kindness and goodness can spread from such a small act to a monumental and meaningful mission. Charlotte, with her radiant smile and eyes shining with pride, whispered in my ear, "Hunter, my darling, we are changing the world, one step at a time, all together." Today, I sit on the spacious balcony of our oceanfront villa, Miss Amelia's generous wedding gift. I gaze out at the vast ocean under the setting sun, where deep blue waves rhythmically crash against the fine white sand, and the salty sea breeze mingles with the scent of salt and seaweed in my nostrils. Charlotte sleeps soundly in the room, her golden hair cascading over the pillow like a waterfall. Her steady breathing, a beautiful reminder of the peaceful and unwavering happiness we have built together. As my memories flash back to that day, the day I almost couldn't step through the gates of the Langford mansion, my disheveled suit, muddy shoes, and a heart filled with hesitations torn between shame and love, a gentle yet nostalgic smile crosses my face. How wildly my heart was beating back then, how my hands were trembling as I gripped the steering wheel on that drizzling road. But that courageous decision I made at that moment changed everything, my entire life. As I sit here, amidst the crashing waves and the whispering wind, I offer some advice for anyone who feels lost, isolated, and helpless. No matter how difficult the circumstances, no matter how the scornful looks you receive or the pressures weighing down on your shoulders, just continue to be a good person. Help without expecting anything in return. Be sincere and honest without expectation. Then goodness will spread like waves across the surface of the sea, reaching distant shores you never imagined. And most importantly, dare to move forward, to fight for love, for the person you love. Dare to face even the fiercest storm to find the rainbow. If I had turned away that day in fear, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. I would have been tormented forever by the pain of a lost opportunity and a love that nearly slipped through my fingers.